Harrison Buck. The most manly name I've ever run into, by the way. Harrison Buck.
I didn't choose it.
Right. Well, it's very, very manly, or masculine, we'll say these days.
Thank you.
I wanted to introduce you in a way that is interesting because of how we ran into each other and how I identified you.
Take it away.
So for those listening, Harrison and I don't really know each other, but we know each other, which is interesting. We had a photo shoot where the location was at your house because your wife, her name?
Mallory.
Mallory Buck?
Mallory Buck. Mallory Buck Designs.
You got to say that with a southern accent.
I have a tiny bit of a drawl. My mom is from Virginia, so
we're at Virginia.
She's from Richmond.
Oh, okay. I spent a ton of time in Richmond growing up.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So Mallory Buck.
Mallory Buck. Yeah, it comes out.
Oh, yeah. You have to. The thing I find with to get like pack the cat and have it, or I don't know about that.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. So when you get this is where my flats water fishing stuff comes from, is like the Outer Banks. If you've ever been down there much, but the role of how they do the accent, they'll have a saying where they say, I don't know, but they roll it into I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you're going to, well, I don't know. Let's see what's going to happen up there.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, we'll see that.
As Andy from The Office says, like smooth molasses coming out of your mouth.
Like smooth molasses coming out. I was running. That's a different part of the country. Yeah. But when we pulled up to your location, I noticed immediately like my truck, and I was like, got a Tundra. And then it was like, oh, the bumpers, I need to get a new bumper because I've got this habit of changing cars out every year, not because I want a better car, but because I want a different car, which doesn't really, make financial sense. But I noticed the bumper, and I've gone into this thing of I'll improve my truck a little bit each year to make it new. Yeah. And I saw your bumper, and I was like, ooh, that's a nice bumper. So I asked, when I saw you, I was like, are you the owner? Which I also loved your stare guy. He was the most like...
Oh, Scott.
Yeah. So I come into Harrison's house, beautiful home, with like a barn that's been turned into a living kitchen area that's still like exposed wood. And I didn't know what you did. And I'm going through this intro because it was interesting in my head to like, usually when you show up to those type of locations, the people are 60 plus.
Oh, interesting.
Age-wise, right? And we showed up and I'm like, that's a nice place. And then to go inside, I was like, and we were the first people there. Noticed the car, went inside, noticed there was some construction going on. There's a guy working on the stairs. And so I was like, hey, we're here for the photo shoot. Where's the homeowners? And he's like, I thought and he's like, well, he's a little gruff. And he just kind of got up and, said something and then kind of went over into the barn area and yelled like, hey, they got some weird guy out here. And I was like... hey, that was a little strong. And he was like, what, do you want me to call you normal? And I was like, I like this guy.
Yeah, totally.
I like this guy a lot. So it's just kind of this back and forth with him. And then got talking to you a little bit, about your bumper on your car. But then from there, I was like, all right. And he's got these fishing stickers on the back, but they're all color coordinated. They're all white.
All mono. And
I was like, okay, so there's an aesthetic choice. Even when he's sticking stuff on his car, what's this guy do? I didn't know who you are, And I start looking around. There's a lot of like framed band stuff kind of on the walls here and there, and a lot of just, engaged aesthetic, but roughly in my age range. And it's not really common to run into people like that. And I could immediately tell, all right, this guy's either a musician, an artist. Like I could tell, like, and then it was almost, I didn't want to ask you immediately what you did because I just kind of wanted to keep picking out like,
oh, cool.
All right, maybe, all right, And then I saw in the outbuilding where you kind of have a studio or whatever, just more like sports kind of stuff. And I could tell that there was a production quality of things amongst it that I couldn't quite put my finger on, that you were a videographer primarily or filmmaker. But it was really interesting to like, whoa, and all the similarities. And then to get down to, I'm a filmmaker. And I was like, whoa, you're a successful filmmaker at minimum because you have a home, right. Which is
on a shack.
Not, the thing of, what do you call a photographer, videographer, musician, whatever, without a girlfriend? homeless, and so there's a very few that end up actually, owning a home. And, so then immediately there's like how'd you end up here?
Right.
Because if you've done this kind of work, how difficult it can be to actually maintain a creative energy level, to figure out how to charge for it. I mean, it's just a gamut of, you're not going to be employed primarily. You're going to be self-employed between gig. And that's it's a really, really unique person that can have the creativity to do such a thing, but yet enough organization and drive to make these things happen. They don't typically put all that bundle together when they make humans.
Right.
And occasionally you'll run into, but they'll also have eccentricities that are, they'll be more moody, they'll wear out quicker, the blah, 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 but they'll create great work. But then when they're not, they're more difficult to deal with. There's all these things, that are in there. And then getting to talk to you, you've had a head injury that you've had to recover from. A really close friend of mine, one of my best friends, had a massive head injury, and it changed his life. And my wife was watching their kids when they went out for a bike ride. The city brought back his crumpled, bloody bicycle, and my wife had to run out to the driveway and was like, "What is your problem? Why are you bringing that back here? The kids are here," and he's in an ambulance heading to Portland. It was rough. And they dismissed him that day. Like, well, I gotta go home and take some ibuprofen. And like, as you know, head injuries are crazy serious. And it was crazy serious at that time, but they weren't taking care of it. And that was a big issue. But
yes,
the primary interest and motivation here is that we have this odd similarity of being doppelgangers to some degree. Do you wear a hat every day like I do?
All day, every day.
Yeah.
I've been a hat guy forever.
Why?
I just love
why
it.
am I?
I don't know. I've always loved it. I've worn it since I was a kid. I got in so much trouble in school because I had a teacher in school that had a drawer full of my lids because I could never forget to take them off. I even have decent amount of hair. I just love it. And then after the head injury, I needed it. It became a necessity. For actual blocking of light, and then it wasn't going anywhere. Then it was basically stitched to my head.
Right.
But yeah, it is kind of funny. A lot of overlapping Venn diagram parts.
I mean, Tundra,
like model
activity
same
oriented.
year and model Tundra, and like almost the same color. We're talking
gear, everything. It's odd to think you're so predictable in a sense.
Oh yeah,
right. Like that's a weird thing. And the other thing for viewers to notice, he's got hair all the way down to his feet.
Hobbit feet.
But no, everyone should, unless they're working an office job and putting on office socks every day, because then you get the naked ankles up to where the socks go. And if you're ever like on vacation or whatever in a resort, you can spot who's a you must wear a tie most of the time. How do you know? Your ankles.
Your ankles. I've never thought about that.
Oh, it's so weird to me to see it, and I'm like, don't let that happen to you. This man has a full-time job, probably a 401k and retirement and paid off home, and and I can tell because his ankles are bare, but I don't want that.
He has it. He has it all. But look, he's an animal that doesn't have hair all the way down.
Right. I want hair all the way down.
I want hair all the way down.
Right. So, I guess the thing I wanted to know is first of all, how did you get to this point in life? How were you able to successfully make a living off of creatively capturing moving imagery and turn that into something that you could support a family on and survive? Because that's the uphill battle for most everyone.
Yeah.
There's honey here if you want
sweet.
it, or if you just want it straight.
That looks amazing. Thank you. I'll admit. Cheers. It's really interesting. I'm for being out facing the face of my business, and a lot of my work derived from my creativity. Almost always people meet me first. It's really rare that they see my home and my space. It's actually probably the most unique thing about this interaction is that you saw my stuff before you saw me.
Yeah, and I was like,
who's this
I know
Wookiee?
this guy, but who is he?
Yeah, but like, what the
weird.
hell? Why is this sub 40-year-old in this, like, with all these interests in him? Yeah, it's interesting. I'll admit I was a little like, oh man, you're seeing all of me before you have ever even learned my name, which is a trip. I'll admit. Like I hold we hold our property and our stuff pretty close to the chest. We're both out facing and pretty private. It's interesting to be in that position. It's stuff we don't really divulge. It's stuff we like to keep pretty close to the chest. But it's been a process. So I graduated college in 2008 and immediately went into education, actually. So I went back to work at a school that I had gone to in Colorado called the High Mountain Institute.
Again, a similar thing to me. I had one outlet for work and changed, but yeah, go on.
So, really, like, guiding was what I wanted to do for a long time.
Fishing guiding?
No, like backcountry ski guiding, backpack guiding, fishing to some degree, but I didn't have the mental fortitude for fishing until probably the last decade because of ADHD. It was it set my brain on fire.
I wonder if ADHD is our connect. I don't know if I have a degree of that, but for how much our conversation maybe just bounces around like popcorn will be a good diagnosis of
I could help you. I'm diagnosed ADHD. I have in my whole life, and it's actually been it's been a huge part of the last couple of years for me in my recovery. I can or not get into that. I don't know how far off that is off topic, but what's interesting for career trajectory stuff was how little like say I had in it in some ways. So in the early aughts, there was no marketing programs at school. There was no videography. You could go to Tisch or you could go to USC Film School. And I never wanted to do like written scripted narratives. I've dabbled in that to some degree. I've done some production stuff and it was really fun. I liked it, but it was not for me. It was too much. It was out of my control. 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. shoots for a week sucks. And I just like couldn't do that. I like being outside. But at the time, that was kind of your way to do film and video. And I didn't want to do that. And I was being swayed to do it right. Like all millennials were like, no, go get the degree that you can get the job. So I went and got an environmental studies and policy degree because that's what I liked studying. And I knew I could at least teach. And I've always been good at teaching. I was a ski instructor for years. I was an older sibling. I've always taught.
I'm a horrible teacher.
I like it. I think it's fun to share stuff that I'm passionate about. I can't teach stuff I don't like. I can teach stuff I like.
Yeah, I can teach someone who's interested in what I'm teaching. I can do that. Yeah. I can't instruct in an area where I don't have interest. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's tough. I can't sell. I can't do stuff if I'm not interested into it. If I'm not truly bought in 100%, I can't. It's not something that's possible. Yeah, it's part of why I like certain jobs of just like not work.
Is that an ADHD trait?
I don't know. I think that's more of just like for lack of a better word, like an honesty thing. I'm like, it doesn't resonate, and that's part of why I'm like, people are like, "Oh, you're in sales." I'm like, no, I sell certain products. I work with Parlor Skis and I design skis with them, and I love the product. Right. So when people are like, "Oh, the Buck Naked collection, like you just got this cool deal with them," I'm like, no, I loved what they were doing, and we wanted to create some other shapes.
Oh, that so you have a line with them?
Yeah, 3 ski shapes called Buck Naked Collection with Parlor, and that's a good example. I'm like, no, I mean, the relationship formed around the products that we liked building, and we went from there. And now I can speak with my eyes closed. I don't even know who I'm talking to, and I can talk passionately about that product. Right. But if you're like, sell me on the new Atomic Hawk backcountry ski, I'd be like, I don't know. It's got foam in it.
Right.
I wouldn't.
There's certain people that you can put them in a sales position and they'll go, all right, tell me what I need to know.
How do I get it across?
Yeah. And I can sell this.
I kind of envy that in a way. Yeah. It's pretty cool. I really do see people that can sling. I'm like, damn, you like Tommy Boy can sell a ketchup popsicle to a woman in white gloves. I'm like, that's amazing. Super talent.
Now, how often do you get confused for Seth Rogen?
Frequently.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right.
Come on. Like
I can't do that.
Embarrassingly, and since I've lost a little bit of weight, I feel a little bit better about it. I'm like, wait, just is it because I'm fat and I cackle? But it's
no, it's the beard and the eye and mouth grin combination, and the little bit curly hair,
some curlies.
Yeah, for sure.
I do get that.
You got to just throw that laugh out in public. Yeah, right.
It happened. It happened this last year on a trip.
That's funny.
My wife and I were in Italy, and we she was like looking over my shoulder, and there's a table of dudes. And she sure enough saw one of them point the picture of Seth Rogen to the other one. There,
you should start signing like
I
autographs.
Kind of leaned into it. I went to the bathroom and came back. I was like, hey, that was great. Like, just totally chuckling it up. It was funny. I'll take it. He's a genuine cat.
See, our ADHD is really going for it.
Oh yeah.
Like, pew, pew, pew.
But I guess so. Anyway, 2008, I was working at a semester program, and I went back to teach and guide as a school where you take kids in the backcountry.
Oh, cool.
They spend the semester there. They're high school juniors, and they spend 4 months, and half the time they're in the backcountry backpacking, and the other half the time they're in class the whole time. And they come back to prestigious prep schools or any school really, not having missed a beat. I came back to a really tough, demanding high school from that program, and I hadn't missed a beat. I was doing the best I'd ever done, and I spent half the fall semester in the woods.
Wow.
Pretty awesome.
What program was that?
It's called the High Mountain Institute. It's in Leadville, Colorado. Really cool program. And anyway, so I had gone back. I couldn't wait to work there. I went back and worked there right after school for a semester. And over that period of time, the world crashed. And so tried to go into the job market in 2008. I got my first bad injury. First, like, career pivot injury, and I blew my knee out on a rock when I was training for big mountain skiing.
So were you like a prospect for professional skiing?
Yeah, more or less. I was like in the scene, training for big mountain free ski competitions. So my buddies and I moved to Crest Butte, and we're like, they were really in the competitive field. I was trying to see if that was something I could do, or if media was more my, just kind of testing the waters.
Yeah.
Blew a knee. I was also tele skiing. Blew my knee out on a rock, changed everything. So instantly, it's January of 2009, and I'm on crutches, and I'm one of 200 college graduates applying for a stock boy position at a liquor store. And I show up on crutches, and they're like, "See ya, dude." So there's quite literally nothing to do. It was the opposite of the mountain housing crisis. There was tons of housing and no jobs. Now there's tons of jobs and no housing. It's totally backwards.
Yep.
But at the time, I was like, I was going to make a film this season. I wanted to follow us in our trials and tribulations as buddies trying to make our way in the skiing world. And I was like, well, I got nothing else to do. Like, I kept saying, I have a company. And again, I'm like 22.
Right.
My dad's like, do you have an LLC paperwork? And because he's kind of pushing back on me and like, what are you doing in Crest Butte injured? Like, shouldn't you just come back to the East Coast and get a job like everybody else?
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Philly, outside of Philly, in New Jersey.
Hence the hat.
Oh yeah. Passionate Philly sport fan, for better or worse.
What's the name of their mascot?
Philly Fanatic. It's from the Galapagos.
That's what you make when you can't associate any animal with what is a filly.
Exactly. Somebody from Philadelphia wouldn't be very sexy.
No. Gotcha.
I saw an AI of what a Philly is, and it's literally like a dude with a cigarette and a Phillies hat in like a back alley. You're like,
with a cheesesteak.
Yeah, cool. With a cheesesteak, exactly, dripping. But it was like the push that I think was supposed to kind of click me in the direction of like, you're right, fuck it. What's I'm not gonna be Warren Miller. What am I doing? But instead, I was like, you know what? What does it take to make an LLC? And I filed for the paperwork and got one. I was like, I have a company. We're making a movie. And I was like, I'm gonna do the old school approach and follow in the footsteps of Warren and Matchstick and TGR and film a film over the season, edit it over the summer, tour it in the fall.
Yeah.
Let's do it. I did it. It was awesome.
Did you narrate it like a Warren Miller?
I didn't narrate my second one. I almost did it live, and I
love like the endless summer Warren Miller.
Oh yeah,
like, and it's kind of that humorous like, it's kind of weird how these guys do, but you'll always find them.
That's a good Warren Miller voice. Yeah,
it's like the '50s happy neighborhood.
Steamboat. Yeah,
here we are in Steamboat.
It's a beautiful blue sky, Colorado day. Yeah, but I love that. I mean, I loved Warren Miller. And even as it got cheesy and he got less involved, I got more into all the other stuff. But I really wanted to see what the process was like. It was a dream scenario. And I was like, whatever, let's give it a shot. So financially, not the best idea, but also there wasn't anything else going on.
I don't think people like us have the talent to make good financial decisions as much as we have the ability to follow good ideas that have a very low likelihood of being a good financial decision. But when it happens, it's good.
Yeah.
And that's such a stupid, difficult, hard way to look at doing what people like you and I have been able to do. Mm-hmm. But I run into endlessly people like you and I that are making it in this way, like my friend Joe Carter, Nick LaVecchia, Chet Williams, myself. all of these people that have this deep connection to like an activity.
Yeah.
That physical interaction, that experiential thing, exists as a framework that creativity gets pulled into and around, or it feeds the creativity that you exercise somewhere else. Or it's interesting, all the people that have made it like us, and I don't mean made it, but make it in this way, I find generally have a very deep passion outside of the creative part of it.
Yeah.
That is this balance to it that allows for such energy to go into the creativity.
Totally.
I think
you tapped in on it. I've never thought about it with that phraseology until just now. And I think that's it. I don't think any of us, and I feel like I can speak for you. I don't think having made it isn't really the goal.
No.
Making
and
it,
when you
making it is the goal. Creating it is the goal.
Right.
For me, it's like, and that's part of why I even brought up the story of One Winter, my film from that winter, because the goal was to do it.
Right.
The goal was to see it through, to finish a film and then tour it, and literally drive around ski towns and show my film.
Right.
Did I sell it? No.
It's the experience that's the payment.
I had to see it, and I had to see it through what it was like to do all phases of it, because I had made fun little films in college and showed them on the sides of buildings, and we liked that. But what was it like to try and do it? Like really do it? And then later on in the career, it was like, all right, these ski films aren't doing anything. I met my wife and moved to Boston, and she was like, this self-serving video work isn't, it's great, but it's not making anything. And now I was working, part-time I was doing the artist thing. I was working at Patagonia on Newbury Street for 3.5 days a week, folding t-shirts. I got bennies through Patagonia. I was working technically part-time. I got health insurance and everything covered. I would finish on like a Wednesday afternoon, and
Benny's. I was thinking,
benefits.
Like, is that a company? Benny's?
No.
Does he have a client named
Jerry's.
Benny's? And I'm like, oh, benefits. I've never had those.
But as an artist, as a young artist trying to make it, like that was huge. I knew I could then go hit the road, and I was covered. I had health insurance. My wife had health insurance, or my at the time girlfriend. Like, I knew that she was working in her job, like. And that was the grind for a number of years. That's where it took it from passion project to business. And after 2.5, almost 3 years of working at Pata for 3 days a week, and then hitting the road and filming and editing for 4 days straight and going right back to work selling t-shirts and rain jackets on Newbury Street.
Right.
That was the grind. And like, again, it was to enable it. And at a certain point I was like, okay, this thing is actually making enough money for me to go out on my own. And that was the goal. It was not about, is this super successful? Right. No, it's enough to keep me happy and fulfilled and wanting to do more of it and able to do more of it. Right. That's kind of been the goal for a long time. And now I'm starting to look at it and like, we were talking about this earlier, and I think it ties into it. Your definition of success. And I think it's something I've been wrestling with lately, and I don't think it's something I'm trying to justify stuff with. I think it's really trying to wrap my head around a different business model. Your definition of success, and that's part of why I like being my own business owner, because it's up to me what my level of success is.
Right.
When I've had other jobs where it comes down to like, did the Instagram picture get the right amount of likes? Because that's how we justify our spend. I didn't enjoy doing that. No. That wasn't about the art. And the art's always what mattered more to me. The experience, the storytelling has always mattered more to me.
Framing what you're making around enough people liking it is never how you should frame something.
Hell no.
But it's so driven with Instagram. Any social media sharing is, are people going to like this? Because if they like it, then it's recognized, and then I feel validated.
Totally.
In working as an artist, you have to make what you see. And if no one likes it, but you perverted it so people like it, you missed step number one. It has to mean something to you. If it doesn't mean something to you primarily, what you get on the other side of that as far as people liking this thing is not genuinely them liking you. It's them seeing their reflection. And
totally.
But if you're tying into that deeper truth that everyone else sees, then they do like it. So
Absolutely.
It's this weird thing where it's like, well, I can try and make something that everyone will like, or I'll be true to what I think I see. And then if people like it, then you can have that as a sounding board in a degree.
Say what you will about Rick Rubin. He's got some crazy ideas. He's got some cool ideas.
Oh, I love his stuff.
I think he's great. And one of the things is that he says, fuck the audience. It's for you. You are the artist.
100%. Have you read that book?
I've read some of it. I'm still
it's really
good. I'm still having a tough time reading. I'm actually listening to it. Yeah.
I haven't even really had any injuries. I still have a hard time.
It's tough. But I just love that idea of like, because especially in his vintage of producers, so many people came in with, we need to make something that sells on the radio.
Poppy.
Bull crap.
Yeah.
And look at his track record, and it's because you stick to the artist's true nature. So if that's what you're trying to do, that's how at least how I've found you can sell and how you can relate. But again, the idea of like, is it successful? You can develop that narrative and that structure to best fits you. And that's really exciting to me, because there have been times, going back to your original question, there have been times where I'm like, I have to make a fiscally driven decision. I have to take a client. I'm not super pumped on getting outside of skiing, but hey, I'm in Boston and this is the game. I'm going to start working with Harpoon Brewery. I'm going to start doing events, films for all these other groups. Eventually building up a little bit of a portfolio in that area as light and fast and quick to respond to things and quick to be able to travel, creating an actual business structure around what I do well when I'm working for something I'm passionate of, and what can I market and I'm willing to recede on.
Right.
That is what essentially built the business out, and that's what more or less got bought by Aspen Skiing Company when I took the job to move out there. Was a portfolio of work that was grounded in outdoors, but also spread. And you can see, I think if you look through my portfolio, you can kind of see like I get into live music through outdoors, because I was working with Icelandic Skis and they started putting on outdoor concerts.
Yeah.
All of a sudden I then had a bank of work in music, and I started getting clients in music, and I love music. So to me, that was so cool to try something new.
Probably a source for those music posters on your wall in the barn.
Yes. I mean, try to play.
I was hoping, I was like, maybe this guy plays in Fish. That was one thought I had.
No, just a Ravenous fan.
Before I saw you, I was like, and then I saw you, I was like, nope, too young to play in Fish.
Nope.
What's this guy do?
But I think being able to be flexible and adjust is critical, but you have to have a place where you're unwilling to compromise.
Yeah.
There's got to be a backbone to it. There's got to be a reason for it, but you do have to make those decisions.
Right.
And if I hadn't made those calls at certain points, I would have had to give it all up and start something else. And I think that's where you yield, and you're like, okay, yeah. And look, I actually found a space where I could do event videos and stuff. And it was more subsistence work, to your point. That's not, in your early 20s isn't when you're stacking, trying to get ready. But if you're smart about it and you want it to grow slowly, you have to put away, and you have to be smart, and you have to make certain decisions. My wife and I both work and both help the family. That was a big part of, why we wanted to move back to the East Coast, was there are no old buildings in Colorado, and she works with old buildings.
Yep.
So sometimes you make the call that's less ideal. I was dragged out of Colorado. I love living in Colorado, but she wanted to be closer to the ocean and family, and wanted old buildings to work with. And that was a much more financially responsible move to bring another amazing creative back to a place where she can really explode. Right. And so when you see our property, it's not just my work, it's not just hers, it's not just long time, thoughtfully, dare I say, fiscally conservative thought process. Because it's one of those, like, if I had just continued to go just pure passion, pure energy, it probably would have fizzled out. But there's just enough of these decisions to kind of keep it going, to enable it for growth. And now we're looking at this film hopefully selling. And like, again, that was started to do it and to see it through. That's a little bit of a different story. I don't want to get too far off, but the beginning of the film is yet another kind of just like, I don't know if I
so first of all, the radiation of passion in talking to you is a really, you don't get that with a lot of people. And people who are creative and doing it on their own, you can just feel that pouring off of people most of the time. And that's inspiring and nice to be around. But I imagine if you're like me, you'll feel that at times, and it's just like, there's so many ideas and I'm getting them done. And then on the other side of that, there'll be not like an existential exhaustion, but just kind of a like, you'll ride the like, genius. And then on the other side, you're like,
shit,
that's so embarrassing. Like,
oh yeah,
there's these weird things, but it's people like that get You almost want to say, like, you get delusional enough to think you could do it, and then you make it,
Just
and you
enough.
do it,
Yeah.
and then and then later you get kind of pulled back down. You're like, that was really stupid. I don't know how I made that, but then it comes back, and you're like, I can do it again.
Right.
And it's this weird kind of confidence or intuition or connectivity to the larger idea of things that you start to see that. There is just something weird with creativity and working there's something there that I see in certain types of people that you can just feel. And I could feel the material results of that type of personality at your house when I showed up. I think that's what it is.
Cool.
That there's this like pouring out of exuberance into experience that then results in things that allow to go camping and surfing, fishing, skiing, whatever. And you're kind of like, you pick up on that. And then to talk to you, it's to see that active creativity and everything moving is really interesting. Now, I
have one thing to just jump in there.
Yep.
That wave is fascinating, and I agree. And for me, the word you used was confidence is fascinating because I lack confidence. I have very low self-esteem.
Imposter syndrome issues kind of thing?
I mean, maybe. I think it's just super critical. And so...
But he says that in the documentary you made. When he's working with that woman guide, he's like, you can always spot a good guy because they're always thinking, well, how could I have done this better? How could I have done this better? How could I have done this better? And my wife complains endlessly about that trait in me. No matter what we're doing, my fun is to think, how could this be better?
How can I get this best practice? And how do I get shrink the camera bag? How do I
Right. Or like we'll be on an anniversary weekend and I try and make conversation by thinking like, all right, we're in the most idyllic situation. What could make it better?
Oh, yeah.
Like that's fun for me.
I totally agree.
And she's like, you're ruining it. Yeah. And I'm like, but it could be better.
Mal says the exact same thing. She's like, can't this just be enough? I'm like, no, I love throwing gas on a fire.
Yeah.
Like, are you kidding me? We can make this t-shirts from this. Like,
I think some people think of it as critical.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking like, how could we improve? Yeah.
It's excitement. If I like it, I want more of it. I want to make it more. I want to include more things. I want to bring people into it. Like that's fun to me. Like those conversations that just keep jagging and rolling and get funnier and deeper and weirder. Like that's so much more exciting.
Let's just keep rolling with this and see how weird it gets.
But your cycle commentary is very apt, and honestly, that's one of the hardest parts about working in skiing in particular. That was so challenging for me was the forced nature of the cycle.
Just seasonal.
The forced seasonality of it is still something I'm still working on, even though I'm not fully in the ski industry anymore, because spring and early summer, like June, I would dread June for months.
Why?
A total reverse seasonality disorder or whatever. I would see the end of winter and the end of the stuff that I loved doing and coming up to like editing season, hot, muggy weather, just stuff I don't like to do. And like I was really like for years, I'd be in like March and be like, oh man, June's right around the corner. But it's like, make hay, do the job, grind. And because there was the energy side that I'm like, I'm bummed that my favorite thing is over. There was the creative side of like having to shift gears in a post and not knowing what I had shot all winter and needing to get into it.
That's a hard one.
There's the seasonality that was quite literally changing and everybody else is coming online, fired up for summer, and which is a little weird.
Odd.
It's just odd.
Yeah.
It's just, you just feel out of place.
I've been in Phoenix in the spring for a shoot, and it was still like, oh, this is nice weather.
Oh yeah, right.
And everyone goes like, oh, I'm just not ready for summer yet. And coming from the East Coast, Northeast, you're like, what did you just say? You just want to like,
you take that
but
back.
then you realize like, oh, it's like 115 and you'll die.
It's not sustainable.
You're like, oh, okay, it's flip-flop.
But that was very real. And part of why I had to diversify outside of ski industry is like, I need May and June to be fun and engaging and creative. And because that was very real. And that's, with any creative project like you talked about, that graph is so far from linear. You go through so many iterations of like, I got this idea is amazing. We're going to change the world to this is shit. What the hell am I doing?
Yeah.
Like, how dare I think I can do this? Like truly, to then like, I think we got something here. And that's
we might do it.
And that roller coaster is intoxicating.
Yeah.
Like some people loathe that. I think the fear of that roller coaster, the fear of the down days, the months without a paycheck, where if you didn't squirrel away during winter and spring can be kind of terrifying because the next gig isn't coming up till March or till January.
Yep.
So like if you aren't smart about that, and that's how people get kicked out of the industry. It's not their passion or their eye. It's that they weren't thinking about making it sustainable. And when you have true waves like that and weeks at a time where it isn't coming in, you better hope that you had it stored away.
That's some really good advice. And I think something that my wife picked up on ahead of time, that she kept hammering us towards paying everything off, and not having any debt.
Yes.
Because the debt was a thing that no matter what you do until you pay it off, it's always hanging over you. And for me, being fairly emotionally fragile in this realm, like I have a weird relationship with money in that emotionally money means freedom for me. And not having to worry about having it means I get to experience. Whereas if I don't have it, my experience is gone and I'm only focused on getting that thing so I can then go relate to things again. It's like when I eat, I eat one thing on my plate and then I move to the next thing. And it's not a conscious choice. If you just watch myself and my wife, she goes a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this. Like she can do that.
Yeah.
I just focus. Yeah. And like, this is the thing that has to be done. Bam, it's done.
Check it off the list.
Yeah. And it's like, ooh, so focusing me that way is great, but if I have something hanging over me, it is really hanging over me. So it's a hard thing for me to actually own a house and property.
Yeah.
Because it's a constant maintenance that feels really, really difficult.
Yes.
But it's paid off, and so it's very comforting for my wife, but every time I come home, I only see the things that need to be done.
Yep.
And she sees, when she comes home, this is our place. It's protection. It's safe. It's fine. To me, it feels like a burden, it's something that I have to take care of rather than something that takes care of me. So that's a weird way of how both you and I probably experience the motivation to work, and things that influence the ebb and flow of that creativity are interesting. Now, for me, my probably June to end of December are super busy. And then come January, I'm being released. I don't do anything from like January to the beginning of April. I focus on trying to develop fine art stuff, do more podcasting and stuff like that, and choose to not work creatively in photographing architecture during that time.
Is that strictly for like letting the battery refill?
Yeah, I couldn't have said that when I started doing it, but I can say that now.
Smart. I mean, look, you're able to do it for a longer time because of that, probably.
100%. Before COVID, I was doing like easily 3 to 5 shoots a week, full days, and it just saps you. The shooting architecture in the way that we shoot is so incredibly technical.
Yes.
So it is a grind of overlaying articulate visual aesthetic thought process with the experience of, all right, let me come into this space and experience it, then digest how to best compose the quality of this room to a potential view. It's, I love design and I love architecture. I love photographing architecture, but it's also an extremely heavy technical lift.
Yeah.
And a technical lift is different than like what a wedding photographer would do, flow with the event.
Oh, yeah.
There's a different exhaustion of flow at the end compared to a technical combination of flow and technical grind.
Oh, yeah.
It's just such a different thing that by the end of the season, I'm just fried, like absolutely fried.
I'll find that. It's so funny. I love that because I haven't really had that technical overlay element until we started shooting docs with interview. And then I was like, oh, wow, we have a lot of things to keep track of and layer and make sure is really dialed, because my background is run and gun, to a T. So when I'm listening to that, I'm like, man, it makes, all right. So at one point I was a videographer and tour photo guy for Base Nectar before he turned out to be a total creep. But
really?
Neither here nor there. But in 2012, I got a gig to go and do. I had my almost famous month and got to go like be on a tour bus with a national tour of we had 2 tour buses, a crew, and 3 trucks full of equipment, and a different city every night, and a massive crowd. And I'm shooting in an environment that is so insanely chaotic. He's quite literally stacked up, I think, 80 808 subwoofers to shake the crowd. So I developed in 1 month, I developed an astigmatism in my shooting eye because the lights were so intense. You're trying to focus on things that are moving so quickly that have ripples through them. But like the experience and the avalanche and a fire hose of what you're trying to capture and how you're doing it. And I remember the very first night I was so green. I had no earplugs. I had no eyewear. I was all manual because I was trying to like rack focus and coming from skiing, which had a similar chaotic element. You're moving quickly. Like you set up the best frame you can and you crank and you move on and you're sweating, you're carrying gear. It's the opposite of what you're talking about, where
it's
you're
like combat.
It is more. You're like, which I dug because I like that dopamine flow.
Right.
But that slow down, sit and absorb. I am envious of that kind of workflow because it's wild. Watching you guys work almost made my brain catch on fire because of how slow it was in the right way. So methodical, beautiful, and look at the results. It's just so different than my experience, and what I went into it for was more like combat photography than. And
it's weird, if you'll take your dog to another dog owner's house, they're like, your food's better than mine. Immediately they're like, what kind of food is this? This is great, And I look at what my friend Chet does. He does commercial medical work. And so he's always working with people that have been helped and fixed, which are not models. And so it's really difficult. It's really more flowing and chaotic, but still that technical part of it with lighting and composition of place that has to be judged by an end client more so within an architectural and person. It's what he does is different, but I think probably more moving parts that are difficult. What I do has this aspect of playing God for a day.
Yeah,
in that you come into a space and you do what I say, and
you manicure every.
And you get to control everything and you get to keep people out. It's not that you have an ultimate authority as much as you get to control the space for a little bit and, make sure that everything is where you decide it's going to be, rather than, kind of like, well, this is all we get, so we'll make the best of it. We make the best. And that is a hard thing of always aiming at perfection, but trying to beat the clock to get the shot list.
Totally.
So it's... when you find the clients that you can work well with in that process, it's like, okay, we both get it and work well together, and you just kind of sync up and go, that's who we're shooting for.
I mean, that's everything. If that relationship isn't there, it's not going to work. Right. Like, you have to understand the product, the client, and they have to understand that they hired the person that's right for it. And if it's not the right fit, it's not going to work. Nobody's going to be happy. The artist isn't happy. The client isn't happy. I mean, that's critical to have that shared vision. But that's so interesting. That's just so not at all any of my experience. Like, I have so little experience setting up lights even because of the nature of the work, but that is cool. That idea, it's just not, I talk about the differences, my wife and I, and she has this absolutely amazing ability that I'm learning more people have, but she has this ability to see what could be in some place. And especially in like a space, like the ability to walk in and say like, oh yeah, we can blow this wall down. We'll open this up. I'm like, how do you see that? Like, what do you,
that's
what do you see?
Pushed me into architecture. I have that ability to do that, but I don't have the ADHD maybe side of me is like, but you want to do this for 3 years on the same, don't do that.
Right.
Like, oh, okay.
But she has this, she's like, no, I'll see it. And it could take 3 years, but it's going to be amazing. And I can see where it comes from. For me, like, as we were going through the process, I get a lot out of floor plans, sure. But then you go in until we were actually in the floor, when they were like, all right, we need to figure out where this is going to go and where this is going to go. I'm like, until we're in it, I can't tell you. Because I have almost the opposite, like the inability to see. Like, a blank page scares me to death. But if there's a scene, and the more that old school photography adage of like, within 10 feet of you are 100 photographs, Like that idea has always excited me, that like in that corner, there are gorgeous images and there's reflective light coming out of a weird little scene over there that nobody else is going to be seeing. How can you bring that out and get it in camera as best as possible? Because I'm not trained in editing and I don't have an amazing Tim. But like, so it's always been about in camera as dynamic as possible, which is really interesting as the technology's shifted. And I've shifted to things like a red, where you're going for the flattest image possible with the most information and highs and lows. It's tough when you've been taught to shoot high contrast and expressive light for a long time. You know, not even taught, but that's where I pushed. That's where I was told internally that that's the beauty. You're going for the most striking image possible in camera. It's a big shift to have to shift that way, but it's always been more about what can I bring out of something? How can I show this as beautifully as possible without moving a damn thing? And not even in post, it's like, I don't even do that for photos. I'm like, nope, just sit where you are. Like, it's because that's at least the fun. That's where I get to really at least pull, especially before the head injury. It was a lot easier to pull the info out of that stuff.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'd like to talk about your head injury and how it affected your creative process and your personal life as much as you're willing to share.
Sure.
In that, you know, head injuries have come on the line to, you know, realizing that they're a real issue. It's not kind of like, oh, you got knocked out, walk it off, don't take a nap for a while. Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Just from people who are close to me that I've had go through it and seen like how like actually their personality can change from a head injury, and the sensitivity to recovering from a thing that was just almost impossible for someone who is self-employed and you know, just horrible. But so how was that for you? How's it affected your creative process and running your business and your personal life?
It's pretty much changed. It's changed something in every single aspect of my life. Not a single part of my life hasn't been altered from mild to severe.
Yep.
Professionally severe. I'd say interpersonally severe. Thankfully, my relationship with my wife has more evolved with it, and I'm alive today because of her and her support. But everything has changed. And as far as literally and professionally and more like technically, what I had before it was the ability to multitask. I'm realizing at like kind of a different rate. Like what I could keep up in my head at once was more than I know now. I'm like, I guess, I could really see it when I was editing video. And that was like the first big one where I was like, oh my God, I can't edit. And it took me a while to figure out why. And I was like, well, yeah, the migraines from looking at the screen, that sucks. And obviously like raw amount of time at the screen and at the monitor, like that was something I couldn't do. So it took a while just to get through something. But what I really lost, at least for years, was the ability to hold all that information at once. So when I'm looking at...
To kind of juggle it in the air, to pull certain
and that's what I was
out.
doing in my editing process, because there's a lot of shoot first, find story, edit, and pull together. So when you're doing that, you're looking at your timeline, you're looking at how it plays in with the music, you're looking at your catalog and everything that's in there, and you're looking at how it all lines up. That went from being able to keep it all in my head, know where I was in the timeline, know where I was on the beat of the music, and bring it in and make some edits and keep the thing moving. That went out the window. So the first time I tried editing after the head injury, I was like, where was I? Where was I? Where was I? Where was I? And I was like, oh my God, this is terrifying. Like, I literally don't even know what I'm doing. All the keypads were there because it was kind of, what's that kind of memory where it's still locked in, like kinesthesiologically?
Yeah, kinesthetic.
Yeah, so like that was there. I was like, oh, I know where the blade tool is, but I didn't know what shot I had just looked at. I didn't know how it fit in. I didn't remember where I was in the song. And so that was a really good example of like what wasn't working technically on the post-production side. The production side, my eyes weren't working together. So I would go and close my eye and look through the viewfinder, and I'd open it back up and they wouldn't line up again. And anywhere from like for minutes to hours. So all of a sudden it'd be like 60 minutes after shooting for like a few seconds, like a few frames. I'm not talking like minutes focusing on like a bird long distance. I'm talking about like real basic trying to get back to shooting.
Right.
And my eyes would be doing this and I'd get dizzy and migraines.
So you kind of went chameleon.
Oh, dude, it was,
like,
oh yeah. it was funky. And that's part of what my prescription is. It's pretty mild, but it's just enough to get them back to working together again. Wow. They had years of different OT and things like that. And
now the injury itself didn't sound like it was dramatic as much as you took a hit.
It was a bad hit.
No blood, no broken, but something's
pretty
not
bad.
Right.
So it was I think what people don't understand about head injuries. I'll back up one step. My first TBI was in 2009. And since then, that
TBI?
Traumatic brain injury.
Okay. Yep.
Which is just like what we refer to, it was a concussion, but it was also a TBI. There's just,
Those
it's a bigger
business.
umbrella. Yeah. Concussion is a type of TBI.
Okay.
That wasn't even a term in 2009. Right. When I had my first ski accident in Jackson, Wyoming, I went to the ER to make sure I wasn't hemorrhaging, and they said, don't hit your head for a while. There was no understanding of symptoms beyond physical, beyond are you lightheaded and dizzy and like peanut butter mouth. There was none of the understanding of the emotional symptoms, the crash, the depression, the anxiety, all that other stuff wasn't even out yet. That all came about much, much later. So when you cut to what ended up being my fourth TBI was this one in 2017, you've got compounding factors that make them worse. And if you're so one of the predisposing factors to making a recovery from a concussion or from a TBI is if you have a disorder like ADHD, that's going to prolong your recovery. If you've had...
It's also kind of a superpower in my opinion.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I love talking about that. I mean, the ability to hyperfixate, especially when it's on something you want to hyperfixate on, amazing.
It's great.
It's incredible.
It's fun.
It's better than... Yeah. But I didn't know that was going to be a predetermining factor to why my recovery was long. So concussion 2 and 3... year-long recoveries were before I was feeling myself, but I was able to work. That wasn't affecting things like that. I was kind of grinding through it. This one proved to be just crippling in that way. Like, that's a terrible word to use, but like really just shut it all down because symptoms crashed across the board and kept me from being able to be anything like myself. I was like a true shell of a human. It was dark. My wife had to quit her job to take care of me, like print out emails at 18 font and highlight to help me read. But it was pretty significant. And I think it also plays into the story of the film. So the injury.
So before we go into that, this film called Meko, right? Based in the Bahamas around this gentleman. What was his name?
His name is Meko Glinton.
Meko Glinton, legendary fly fisherman who's just, it permeates his person. Incredible, top 5 in the world kind of guy, a guide down there in the Bahamas, and it centers around him and the generations of his family that do this and the tragedy that they've gone through with the Hurricane Dorian. And I'm halfway through it right now at a very difficult point where friends of his have, been lost. And it's a documentary. It's really well done, really well shot. So that's where we're at. Documentary.
Thanks. No, I appreciate it. It's part of why it's a documentary now. It's a feature-length documentary that has actually gotten into a couple film festivals.
Oh, cool.
We're actively trying to sell it and get distribution right now. It's a thing. In the winter of 2017, it was something for a really injured animal to occupy their time with. I had nothing else to do besides go to doctor's appointments, and I was so far from what I had just been. Like the December of 2016, right before the accident happened, peak physical, theoretically at peak job. Like, wife and I are happy living in Aspen. Like, I'm skiing with pros. I'm literally living like
the dream.
I was living the dream, and peaking and like feeling really good about it, and like, dare I say, confident. Like it was a pretty polished time, and this was a like complete car accident essentially in that way, like that quick and aggressive and violent. I was so wounded and so injured in such a dark place, and just literally had nothing else to do. I was like, I really want to get back into it, and I want to see if I can. I'm just going to start. I'm going to kind of start over. Like, I'm no longer working for Skico, Aspen Skiing Company. I'm here for now. We didn't really know what the future held for us. And I had made a film in 2014 about 5 different fly fishing guides. It's called The Tightest Line. And I just kind of finished it and started submitting it to film festivals. It got into Maine Outdoor Film, and like right after that, I got the job at Aspen. And basically, had to drop everything and go take the gig and work there, which was great until I got the accident. So it was a little bit of like, well, what am I going to do? Like, I need to see if I can film. I need to see if I can create a project. Like, I'm not quite ready to drop my passion and career. Like, I've already lost kind of everything else except for my wife and home. Like, I need to see if I can be me. I'd done my Malcolm Gladwellian 10,000 hours to get to that point in my career, and was like, I just wasn't really ready to let that go. I had to let go of my physicality, my mental state, all this other stuff. So I was like, I need to at least try. And I knew I wanted to talk to, Meko and I were friends at that point. We had already worked together. We had loved working together. I knew that there was more story there, and I just wanted to see it through. And that's about as far as it got. I incorporated my LLC and started and went to go film in the Bahamas for a week. My symptoms crashed. I couldn't do it. Like, I came back, and the recovery from that week was months. Mm-hmm. And for 2 years.
How long was this after your accident?
So August, so 6 months.
Wow,
so 6 months later, I'm feeling good enough to go on the trip, and feeling good enough to execute, and kind of caught up in the moment and get through it, even with migraines and all that, and like almost falling off the boat, and like kind of bullishly moved through it. But I was so beat up from my symptom crash coming back that I didn't open the footage file for 2 years. So like, can't do it. Yeah. Every time I tried, I would like basically freak out and couldn't do it. And so it got tabled, like big time tabled. And I basically my job was recovery. Like, I was seeing as many people as workers' comp would allow me to. PT on the shoulder wasn't healing. I've learned since then from people that, like, if numero uno is injured, it's not sending healing energy anywhere else.
Interesting. Yeah.
Which makes kind of perfect sense.
Yeah.
Your brain needs to heal first if you're going to function. Like, your shoulder is irrelevant, even if it's your right one. So something that should have healed pretty smoothly didn't. I ended up having to have surgery on it. It's been a funky kind of road on it in its own right. But it was one of those, like, okay, I just didn't know. So at the time, thinking about what it could have been, a 5-minute YouTube video that shared amongst friends and family that I chicken scratched together. And at the time when we started, that would have been a tremendous success. Just
for the Meko film?
Yeah, just to do it. Like we talked about, like trying to see if I could do it again. It wasn't like a whole lot of capital up front to do it. I was like, let's buy the plane tickets, bring a friend down there, bring your camera, see what we can do. Get some initial interviews, where all the 2017 footage came from, the initial interviews. But that was it. And there was years where I was like, that's not a thing. I can't do it. I'm not going to turn it into a movie. And it was, I think, really hard for people around me, because it was the only thing besides recovery and eventually fatherhood and that came during the recovery as well. That was kind of all I was doing. So I think it was a little sad. I think some people were like, man, I really want to at least see it through for you or with you. And I my brother was on the first trip and really wanted to help get it back going. And it was a funky time to say, I can't do this. We kind of touched on this already too. I can't edit it. I can't do that. But I think I can tell this story. And that's when we brought Billy on board as the editor, who'd never done any of these things before. And that is what I've found, is that the technological stuff isn't really bouncing back the way I'd want. And that bummed me out big time. Like, the editing is not really coming back. It's really minimal. I can do, like, what's come back is like really low key experiential shoots. So say we're on like a heli ski trip or something, and I can shoot with a GoPro. I can edit it to a fun song, a 2-minute, show the experience. So I do that. I parlay a lot of stuff like that. I'll do trips where I'm like part liaison with the guides. I'm also capturing the content and making the edit, and it goes back and I get my trip paid for and things like that. That's a huge part of how you make these gigs work, is you find ways to cover and pay for your experiences. And that's how you build your portfolio out. So it's a lot of like that kind of stuff, to answer your first question.
Yeah.
Rather than, because there's not a lot of money up front in these things. So it's almost more like you have to back sell it to people.
Yeah. You have to front the money or the elbow grease, whatever.
You have to front the elbow grease at least, and then yield. And that will more often than not bring you back on for a paid gig. So if you're willing to put in the elbow grease, the time, and because I was injured, I was trying. So the tech stuff was very challenging. I kind of lost the ability to really hone in on the camera. I've had some gigs, some still portrait gigs and things like that, and it's just too many moving parts. It's just trying to keep too much in my head. I'm not doing it the way I wish I was, that I used to. But I'm finding management is actually, I'm better at it than I thought. The building of this team around the film and what we've done as a team is the most exciting part, almost more exciting than the film. The film I'm really excited about. Yeah. But without the team understanding the assignment right off the bat, knowing that this is a passion-driven project that's truly about awareness and supporting people. It's not going to be something that we all make a ton of money off of. But if we do it right, we can get it done and get it out there and hopefully raise some support for these people. I think one thing I talk about is like, if with regard to the project, if I was good at money management or something, I probably would have set up a different account and had it directly fund them. But I'm not that savvy. I'm a storyteller, so that's how I can help. And that's really this next level of my career is more about that. Focusing on the fact that I can still maintain a story. I can tell a story. I can now actually see a pretty complex web of stories and how they all overlap. That stuff I can actually see. It's the tech filming stuff that I got into all this from that I loved that I'm having trouble doing. But instead of focusing on that, I'm trying to focus on, well, what can I do? I can conceptualize. I can draw these connective tissue and I can build people to help me execute on this vision. And I think I didn't know, because I had never communicated with an editor before, that I could communicate my thoughts to an editor. I thought it was just inherent. That process with Billy 2 summers ago, only over the phone and over Zoom to learn, I was like, partway through, I was like, I think I'm actually getting the hang of how to express my edits to somebody. And I think it's more of a testament to him and his ability to hear what I'm saying. And like, I think I know what you mean. You mean bump this over? But we were able to edit the film over the phone and over Zoom from afar. I hadn't met him until last summer. And I think that has been the most fulfilling part in how we actually got it done. Bringing on people that with the understanding that we're going to take a price cut to do this. If we do it right, I'll be able to pay you in full afterwards. But this is something we need to do. It's really important. And everybody got the joke. And I think as I slowly built out, people were starting to really hear that, like, that this was really important to me and that I couldn't do it on my own and that this was bigger than that. And it had to get done. It's a story that is needed to get out there. And I'm so proud of that. We've built a team of people to get that. Yeah. Our Alex Delano, who's now my assistant director on our next film that we're in pre-production for now, she started as our graphic designer. And I've got a small team outside of Billy, who's a professional editor. They're all marketing PR folks that have now turned into this film production team. And that's part of why we reverse engineered the sausage, so to speak, making Meko. Because again, it started as a sick, wounded animal trying to make a YouTube video, and now it's an actual feature-length film, and we're trying to sell it and learn how to do the amount of phases in post-production and distro that I didn't know existed until we got here. It was all just part of the learning curve getting to that point. And without the team, we couldn't get there. But now we've got a functioning team that's actively getting ready to shoot this winter on something. And I mean, I mentioned it, but like, I didn't know that we'd even finish it, let alone want to ever do it again. In some ways, I got to a point where I'm like, if I just finish it, then I know it. I could, but I was not banking on wanting to turn the career into this. I was starting in the time of healing and starting the movie and backing off for 2 years. I'd tried so many other just little creative projects to keep my brain going. Like designing the skis was a really fun project that was not set up to necessarily be anything more than working with Mark at Parlor. I had some ideas that I was really excited about. He tapped into that. And then we had something that went to market 3 years later. It was not like a super aggressive business plan. And I think like my DJing was something too. I was like, I'm not really able to look through a camera lens, but I'm really loving the connection with music and visuals. And I found through different ways that like spinning vinyl was a really cool way of cultivating that same experience that an editor does. But it's different and I can do it and I can handle it. And there's a tangibility there. Yeah. So I'd spent a lot of those recovery years just like trying stuff, and not just trying it, but trying it to a point where I could really see if it was viable as a potential pivot. Cause I didn't have confidence that we'd be ready to do another one. So probably the biggest success is that not only is it done, not only are we happy with it, but we actually want to do it again, we've learned that it's not quite, the word isn't philanthropic, but awareness based and about a group of people that need exposure to inspire and to help means more. And I think being able to tell those stories is what I've really found we as a team, and me in particular, like to do. And I made a comment because one of the first premieres and Q&As we did was when the movie Madam Web came out. And I'm not hating on Madam Web. It's not a great flick, but there's thousands of people in that credit roll. And again, I'm not trying to bash Marvel or Sony or anything like that, but I'm like, thousands of people working on like a really mediocre, like 19th Spider-Man movie. And that was a little painful because I was like, man, there are 7 billion stories on this planet of substance. Everybody has something going on. Everybody can inspire somebody else, truly, if you think about it. Humans as a species, not my favorite species on this planet. I don't love us at large, but the individual is capable of so much. And there's so much from different people. Meko is a truly inspiring person. I mean, in the 7 years we went through this, there was the Me Too crisis, or not crisis, the Me Too movement, where all of a sudden they're like, you're making a movie about a guy right now? I don't know if I would do that. And I was like, I don't know. Maybe the world needs to hear that there's still good men out there.
You're right.
I'm not making a comment on Me Too. I'm more just that over 7 years, a lot goes on socially and with their coming back from the hurricane, all this other stuff. So, but finding stories about people that are motivating and moving and that we can spread awareness and actually help. And we're directly trying to help support the East End of Grand Bahama and help them rebuild and drive people to Bahamian-owned businesses. And there are theses at play that are really about support more than anything else. We don't have a great call to action because it's really murky down there. It's a corrupt government that it will just strip and not support. It's other people that are challenging to work with. There aren't really great nonprofits that are actually doing it down there. So in turn, we've kind of backfilled, be like, you know what? The way that you can help is by meeting him, signing up for a fishing trip. And if it's not him, just Bahamian-owned business. Yeah. Don't go to Nassau. Go to Grand Bahama. Try Freeport out. See what it's like to eat conch salad. Like, this is the stuff that I think we're trying to encourage beyond, and that's the support that we're trying to help. And I think what was one side part of the project that I'm really proud of was that I really believe in putting your money where your mouth is with these things. And I don't know if people would necessarily suggest fiscally to take, let's call it 1/200th of your budget and make your documentary production retroactively carbon neutral. Probably not what people are saying you should do with that money. I totally disagree. And instead of just buying carbon credits like Exxon can do, we were like, what can we actually do this the right way? We've been working with Bonefish and Tarpon Trust, which is an amazing organization in Florida about the science and conservation of these saltwater game fish. They have a program. Their way of saying how we can help rebuild the Grand Bahama and Abaco is through replanting mangroves. Mangroves this sounds way out, so give me a sec. Mangroves are, if you're not familiar with tropical environments, absolutely critical. They literally hold the islands together. They are the only reason there's biodiversity there. They are where fish spawn, then stay protected. They're where birds, it's the habitat.
And mangroves are kind of like trees whose roots go down into the water. And water can pass through them. Exactly. Fish can hide. It's almost like a wood reef that also goes above water in a 100%. Sense.
Beautifully said. It's exactly what it is. And it's robust. And it truly is why there's biodiversity there. Yep. Hurricane Dorian killed all of the mangroves. Mangroves are wild. They're one of the only trees that live in salt water and don't need fresh water. They process and desalinate. Whoa. And that's how they're able to go through. And then, so they have what's called the sacrificial leaf. If you look at a bunch of mangroves, and I can send you some photos but there's a couple little yellow leaves on it. And the plant is literally taking the water, pulling the salt out of it, hydrating itself, feeding itself, and then pumping all the salt into one leaf and dropping that. And that's called the sacrificial leaf.
Does it get little like crystals on it and stuff? Or?
No, it's like in it. Whoa. It just kills the leaf off and it goes yellow. Beautiful, that's like our autumn. Yeah, it's gorgeous. And there's something there about the sacrificial leaf that I just love the term. And so when Hurricane Dorian came in, it came in on a king tide, which I can explain, but super high water to begin with. And then you've got the hurricane that comes in, 220 mile an hour winds, storm, but the storm is moving 1 mile an hour, just creeping.
And on the downward kind of across the whole thing, pretty much. Not going across it, but like...
Yeah, just grinding. Exactly. Terrifying. So the mangroves that are suited for king tides, that lived through them all the time, this water stuck around at a level that was higher than it basically drowned them all out.
Yeah.
And it's a species that's designed to sustain that. I think that's one of the points we don't necessarily get across in the movie as well as I'd wished, is that these people, animals, local environment are designed to withstand huge storms. They withstand huge storms all the time.
This was an extra huge.
That's what's so scary about what this did, is that we're not talking about soft folks and like that aren't used to storms, and this comes through and does this. It is that's what's so wild about it. So anyway, all the mangroves died, all the sand gets moved around. It's being completely flush. So BTT's proposal and what they're actually doing is we're going to go plant mangroves and get it back generating. We figured out what our carbon footprint from production was, figured out exactly how many mangroves that is. They're also amazing carbon sequesters.
Oh yeah, trees.
And them in particular, like seagrass and mangroves are some of the best out there. So not only are we covering our ass on our carbon footprint, but we're doing so with direct action in actually rebuilding the East End of Grand Bahama. So when we talk about putting our money where our mouth is, I truly believe that we can lead by example and show that like a bootstrap production crew still cares to that degree.
Right.
Because we're not necessarily going to sell this thing for a bunch of money and be able to send what Meko calls Hollywood checks. It's just not a thing. There's not Hollywood checks and ducks. It's just not a thing. But we can send people, and we can send people who want to go fish down there, and we can send people to go. And we're going down there to premiere the film in November and bring it to the community. We've got our team and we're going to show it down there, and 150 Bahamians are going to be able to come and really celebrate Grand Bahama. I think the whole thing we've been trying to do is tell their story and celebrate them.
That'll be an interesting moment to watch people see a production on them.
Yeah.
To watch how they respond to that. And
it's that part of it, telling somebody's story who's alive and actively cohesive. It's is trip. There's a ton of internalized pressure to do it right. To do it justice and not have him just happy that it exists, but proud of it and feel like we did it right has been a top priority. And I think because there's history there, his grandfather, David Sr., basically started the sport there. There's also history in them not feeling like, I don't know how much to get in anthropologically, but like the Bahamians have been, the Bahamians that live there now, for the most part, are all descendants of slaves that came through. They have experienced hundreds of years of just being taken advantage of and left. We're desperately trying to be one of a very small population of people that hasn't taken advantage and left, and that's been there to support.
Like to empower a local population to do this on your own.
Exactly.
Like
build
here's
within.
some help and the resources. You got to do it on your own.
It's got to come from within, because the other law, and that's one of our theses of the film too, is that specifically this industry, bone fishing there's a study done a number of years ago where they figured out that each bonefish that goes back into the water, so we're also trying to help cultivate this catch and release ethic, is $5,000 into the economy. What it took for somebody to come there is $5,000. If we can understand that like that, and say, and then the other aspect, so there's that like there's a business here, and there's a good one. But some of the guides are the highest paid people on the island. Like and Bahamians at large that aren't in the fishing industry have a perspective that like that fishing guides are subsistence, because the other fishermen are like conch fishermen. It's not highly paid. It's not educated. It's not it's not something people want to do. So they hear fishermen and they're like, no. Fly fishing guides are incredibly articulate, thoughtful, high-paid, amazing members of their community. There's a lot going on there. There's a lot of desirability to go into that. There are no young people coming up to do it. And most of the time, guides are working for American, Canadian, or British businesses. So only some of that is staying in. It's the guide getting the paycheck, and that's it. It's not their family. It's not anything. So to have a Bahamian-owned business that is hires the community.
Yeah, the wife's running the cooking, the grandmother's doing the hospitality,
exactly.
And the son's doing the...
He's got the son coming up to be the guide. His dad is one of the guides. His mom is the chef. His wife is the manager, and also the masseuse. Like you're then hiring your entire village.
Generations of capability, empowerment, responsibility. This is side red herring. But if you were to talk of reparations in the U.S., I think the best idea is 3 generations of free education and tax-free businesses. Because then you're not taken from anyone. You're using the tax base to say, all right, you get free education and 0 tax on your business for 3 generations. You will have an empowered population.
Oh yeah,
educated and respond. And so at that point, it's a giving back of, all right, what we made your ancestors help us build, you will now benefit from.
Yeah.
And that, to me, that's the most like everyone happy. I keep saying it, hoping that someone will pick up on it.
I think it's brilliant. 48 Acres and a Mule only does so much.
Well, they
haven't even done that.
Did that, and they didn't do it.
No, they did like 1% of that.
And that it's the there's no racial thing about it. Back in the day, the algebra is like Al Jazeera. That was Islamic. They figured that out. We were pooping too close to the tent at that time.
Right.
Okay. This is cyclical, whatever. And to give a population the opportunity and the support to thrive like everyone else in that sense, come on.
Yeah.
It's only going to benefit everybody.
Totally. And I think that's what we're trying to, I just respect Meko so much for seeing the potential, but also seeing that like somebody needs to show that this is possible. It's a great theory, but to start your own, I mean, not only is it a lot up front, but like it takes sand to say, I'm going to go out on my own. We can do this.
Yep.
And he's a big enough name and a big enough personality that can and is going to, I'm confident, but there's tons of headwinds that are associated with it. And I think we're lucky as people that are trying to use this model for rebuild, saying specifically bonefish lodges that are owned by Bahamians is how you can rebuild this whole community that's not there.
Right.
Like that we have an actual model for that is critical. Because otherwise it's just theories and people being like, I'm not gonna start my own lodge, dude. I can just work at North Riding Point. It'll be fine. Like it's not ideal, but it's too big an idea. It's too hard. It's too far away. And I think that's what's so cool. So next weekend, I got invited to go down to this Bahamian Guides Conference, and we're going to show the film and speak on behalf of some of these other practices we've learned along the way, which is pretty cool. But the fact that I can be there to help bolster Meko and at the Guides Conference show the way through him, and not have it be like, hey, this isn't my business model. I just think this is really useful, and this to kind of do what you're saying, like this is the education free. Like we can help spread that out. And unlike a lot of small business owning Bahamians that see other people as competition, he sees it as generational change. It might not fiscally affect him, but if it's done right, if there's even one other Bahamian owned lodge on the East End of Grand Bahama, the life his son and grandkids will have is different. And it's better.
That's really interesting. There's also the aspect of there's these personalities that are unique that you have to have the infrastructure there with the people from the community who are those personalities like Meko, who like his grandfather, his dad, and him, and it seems like his son potentially are those types. One of them was the type naturally, it seems, or before them, and then that type shows the way. And the other people who might not be as much that type are able to be pulled into that and learn the ways and become, and then you get these generations of more resourced, more stabilized, more positive existence of understanding like, oh, you exert yourself into difficulty and there's a return. You exert into difficulty and there's a return. To become dependent on a handout, either from the government or from your family, you're going to become a pretty useless person. So like the Trustafarians and the people living off the government, same thing. They just have a better, Patagonia lined van
for now.
For now.
Yeah.
So it's this kind of weird thing to balance that all out and make it grow in an under-resourced island community. I spent 2 years as a high school teacher in the Marshall Islands.
Oh, no way.
Out between, you leave California, go to Hawaii, go the same distance of direction. You end up in the Marshall Islands where they nuked everything. That was really interesting to see. Like you can see the generational effect of America coming in on a Sunday after church and saying, this is for the betterment of the world. If you leave your island and let us blow it up, it's just insane what we did there. But the government was going to do it somewhere. At least they just didn't show up and murder everyone. Could have done that
before.
We've shown as a human species that we can do that. Luckily, we didn't. But they moved them to an island with no atoll in the center, which is how you make your living in that situation or survive. They put them on this island that has like a tiny little puddle in the middle, and it was weird. But even in that, you see the oppression, not even active oppression, but just lack of resources and the hopelessness that it does to a community.
Passive oppression is just as bad.
Right. But then you'll see these people that are the tall poppy in a sense, that they're like, no matter the situation, there'll be these people who will like, I'm going to make something happen.
Beacons.
Yes. And then when you start to see those people rise, if you can support them and if they have this selflessness to support those and bring those up around them like Meko in this film, then you get, I think, a lasting change and inspiration.
He
and everything
sees
from that
overlap. I mean, we've talked about, maybe not on the podcast before. He was a youth minister for a long time.
Yeah,
giving back to the community is deeply ingrained as to who he is.
Very missionally driven.
Oh yeah, I mean, he spends his free time doing casting, going to schools and giving casting clinics to kids. He sets them up, pays to have them all come out to his property and puts them up for the weekend and does intricate casting techniques and guiding. I mean, he is trying to single-handedly set up the next generation to come in, and no one else is doing it. They're just saying, like, what a shame all the guides are aging out. He's 44 and he's one of the youngest guides on the island.
Wow.
And he's like, no, I'm going to make that come up behind me. And it can't just be Big Mike, his son, that's doing it.
Right.
And again, you want to talk about putting your money where your mouth is? He's not making a dime off that. He's not going to see the return on a young gal becoming a guide, but that doesn't matter to him. He sees it as that's bolstering the community. That's bringing people back.
Yeah.
I think that's so powerful. I love hearing people. I love hearing him talk about it like that.
Right.
You brought up a really cool, tough point about, and I'll kind of like synthesize them. The idea of like going through something hard and seeing and we talk about going through hardship and then seeing potentially brighter colors as a result. And maybe people going through life, doing what they thought was the right thing, never really having hardship, never having to struggle or rebound or rebuild. They can seek happiness. I think they'll be able to see happiness and sadness, but I don't think that spectrum's very robust. I think if you go through deeper, darker periods, your spectrum opens and you can see brighter, more full colors.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily work the other way. I don't think just because you're capable of seeing really cool stuff and really bright experiences and take that in doesn't necessarily lead you to being able to handle harder things. But surviving will change your perspective on everything. They are survivors. I consider myself a survivor of a traumatic brain injury less than someone who's recovered. And when we talk with the people we're working on in the next film, it's a nice little segue. You're talking to people that have seen hell and therefore can experience bliss in a different way. And that is amazing to be around and humbling. We're making the next film is a short 20-minute doc about sit skiers and why everybody deserves equal
like paraplegic skiers.
Why everybody deserves equal access to the healing nature of the outdoors. And it's through two different people, paraplegic and quadriplegic. One is one from an accident, the other from a brain disorder at birth, and talking about what being outside and the healing nature of the outdoors does, and why that is worth seeking, why everybody deserves equal rights to that and equal access. And sit skiing is an amazing thing. And you get, we have these incredible conversations about how technologically, like, their lives are only so much, but technology allows for it. Amanda is one of the women in the film, and she needs electrical currents to stimulate her bowels. She is alive and living in a certain way today because of technology. She also has to go out. She needs to ski to feel gravity-fed freedom that isn't technologically driven. Yeah. You could say this ski is tech, but that push and pull. But when you talk to somebody who's been through that, and you see the positive, when they experience something positive, it is off the charts. It glows.
Oh yeah.
You can see it on the other side of a wall.
Yeah.
Versus somebody that hasn't been through that, they might be experiencing happiness, but you wouldn't even know.
When you come across someone who's had too much ease, you'll find suicidal and depression tendencies. The stats on people in ski towns in suicide are immense. It's horrifying. And part of it is the pressure that you're living in perfection. Yeah. You're living in a snow globe. Like, why am I not happy every day of the year? And that weighs on you. And that is a very real thing. The studies coming out of these, almost like the better the place, the worse the suicide rate. Yep. In like a access sense. I think it's a misalignment of what will actually fulfill you. And it's to me, the process of dealing with that is similar to, I think, kind of what we were talking about earlier in the fulfillment of doing the creativity work is in doing it. But in like what I do, when you become too good at it, you become a machine, because it's more of a technical drive through subjective experience in what I do. That once you become mechanical at it and so good at it, you lose the experience of it. Yes. Because you know exactly what you're doing. You've patterned it into your mind, so you're not responding creatively as much. You know what to do, so you can charge for that.
Yeah, interesting.
And in doing it that way, you have to charge more to compensate for, in some sense, not having the emotional return in doing that. But by doing that, you prostitute your emotional experience in some sense. And it's a weird, I don't know how to deal with it, because it's such I can't not do it. And if I didn't do it, I'd have to go back to doing it. And if I'm not doing it, I'm not going to be fulfilled. If I do it too much, I start to lose the fulfillment in doing it. If I don't do it well, I don't get paid. Yeah. There's all these weird kind of spider webs pulling on it in every different direction. And it's a very odd thing that you give away of yourself in that creative work.
That's so interesting. That's such a great, man. I have a lot. I'm noodling on with that. I feel like I've, in some ways, probably could have used that advice a lot longer ago, because I could have probably done better.
That is the gift of this podcast. Of someone else like us, maybe.
Yeah, but like, maybe if I had stuck to just ski stuff, who knows where we could be at. But I got burnt out on it, and I was kind of forced out of it. On our most recent time down to the Bahamas, I was going to help shoot for an article for this magazine, and I was like, I don't know if I can shoot this anymore. Like, now this has been my creative engine for so long, and we went back. I'm like, man, I have shot at this, put in so many times at this point. Like, I don't get any of that dopamine drip.
You know exactly where I should be here when they drop in,
which is great.
Like,
I'll
be there.
The imagery is probably better when you look at my portfolio from that shoot.
The end result's better, but your emotional return through the process is different. Whereas, and it's worth far more than money to you. It's like, if you don't have that, you die.
Why am I doing it? Well, I need to have it. I need to have that. If I don't, I'm not hitting the mark. So if we're talking about, if it's financially or fiscally is second or third down the list and it's purpose mission driven first and that's not being met, then we're really not doing it right. At least I'm not.
Right.
And so that's part of why I've worked in ski, mountain bike, live music, doc, and eventually got into story being it, because at least the story then can be different, and that's what will engross and tickle the brain, because you shoot, you know, I love the String Dusters, the band that I worked with. I loved shooting them. There was a different...
Did you say String Dusters?
The infamous String Dusters.
That's great.
They're good buddies I used to film with, and there's a different there, because at least there's a different venue each night. Like, there was some variability to that, but sometimes I was like, man, I'm kind of sick of shooting at night. Like, I miss sunrise. And then with the Bahamas, you're like, man, I haven't been on a boat for so long, and this is so great. I'm finally figuring out how to shoot here. I'm getting the joke. Oh, right, tides, and now I'm kind of got it, and I'm ready to figure something out. Yeah. And now, like, we're having calls this week about how we want to shoot sit skiing and people in wheelchairs, and how we want to shoot the whole film at 3 feet high, and like my brain is spinning out again because I'm dealing with a whole new concept.
These are great new concepts to, like, how could we solve that?
Yeah, how can we solve that? We can do it creatively. How can we engage more people? And it's not that I'm like done. I'm going to the Bahamas next week to help talk about what we've learned. Like, I like that I can keep that going. And if anything, I'm like, well, there's a lot more to do in Grand Bahama. I just don't know if it's me filming anymore. I don't know if I need that anymore.
Right. It might be a continued kind of mission support in a sense.
100%. We're going to go down and teach these netting practices and how we can help more bonefish stay alive from predation. Like, very cool. The movie can help become more of a symbol and a model rather than me needing to perpetuate it. And I can move on creatively to something else and get that I desperately need, but that's a good point. Maybe there is more to be made in really honing your craft, but the return.
Well, I wonder, like, Hero Loves Sushi. What have you seen?
Oh,
that?
Yeah.
How can someone focus like that?
They don't have ADHD.
They just like, like how, and it comes through. People can tell, like, whoa.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it seems like people with your and my talent, but also combined interest thing, like, we're great in newness of experience.
Yes.
And like, oh, we can find the way too. We did that. We got to go now.
Yeah. I think that's part of what, like, makes me
we're pioneers in a sense.
Yeah.
Like, we can only be there first.
Right.
After that, we're going to be kind of useless.
Kind of bored. Kind of useless. And I don't like that word. I try not to, we don't use that in our house, because it's just like, you can't be. Find something else that keeps you from being bored. But yeah, I mean, there's that, you reach that mark. And I think that's part of why I feel like documentary and me found each other in that, because there is a newness every time. And it's not studio, and it's not something having worked, you know, like we talked about scripted narrative. You're like, all right, you got your story. Now you're going to go shoot to that as best as possible, and hopefully, you know, unravel the vision from the script. And then we, you know, in post-production, it's really just trying to line up what we've done here from there. To me, it's like, how exciting is it to go see what's there and pull it out? And like, man, I've never been in a room like this. What does the light do for it? Like, there's something that I crave about that newness in experience, in light, in sound, in environment. And I think that's what makes doc so exciting versus, for me at least, than over set up manufactured single looks. But god damn, do I envy the ability to do that. Like,
I think I'm drawn or interested in people that have a high degree of openness and ADHD because it's just like, what's incredible, you know, like constant. And yeah, it's such an interesting, it's just a continual conversation about, well, what more can we know about this? What else, what way could we combine this differently?
And don't get me wrong, those hyperfixations can also land in existential dread. It's not, which
There's
is like
deep downsides. This is a two-sided coin.
You don't always know where you're going to deep dive, but that's also interesting too. And honestly, I'd rather have those conversations than passive.
Constant, even boringness. Sorry, boring. You know, it's great to have in your life, but I can't take it. You know, like, I need people around me that are consistent.
Yeah.
This is what I say about my preference for architectural spaces is that they are very minimalist and organized because I'm so chaotic. Like, I don't want to be in a space that's chaos because I'm the chaos.
Interesting.
I want to like minimally organized, just like something that would almost feel mechanical and dead to most people. To me, feels like clean and beautiful because it's just like, oh, I don't have to do anything. Everything's already beautiful.
You're the movement. You're the
and
color.
It's clean.
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna go create, and I'll mess the space up, and then like clean it and get back to So,
I mean, that's really cool. I mean, metaphoric. I mean, that's kind of when I do design and logo work, I go for very simple, very clean, almost always monochrome or maybe a 2-color thing.
Like the stickers on your car.
Yeah, I like die cut stickers because it's like I can be the color around it. I can let that but it took a while. My car didn't always look. I mean, I went through the full hippie massacre sticker scenario, but I found that order helps because I am not.
Yeah,
I definitely relate to that.
Now, another thing I want to talk to you about now that I'm getting to know more and more about what you do is that like I started a documentary when I turned 40 and about a loss of faith, which turned into a loss of religion and gaining faith back, which is now I'm at a point where I can do the Ken Burns thing where you lead the viewer into hell, but you also have to lead them back out.
Yes.
And up to a year ago, I was only able to, critically approach religion and everything else and criticize it. But I've been able to work back to a point where I can lead a way out of it that still holds faith, but puts religion in a more understandable light for someone like me. Anyways,
I mean, that's beautiful. I'm very spiritual. I'm not religious. I have an immense amount of respect for religion. It's probably what keeps me from being religious is because I like to understand it and pick it apart. And I have respect for it to a point where I'm like, I'm not there. So I'm not going to say that I'm into that because I'm not at a certain point and I'm not going to buy into that. That's neither here nor there. Meko is very religious. There was a lot of conversation about like, is this Meko fishing family faith and like really lean into it? That would have been a really tough thing for me to make because it's not something I subscribe to.
right.
I'm very curious, so I like learning about stuff. I'm not going to shut anything out, but I'm just not buying into modern religious
Yeah, I mean, just
structure.
even in the beginning where you had the flipping of the pages, but didn't go lean too heavily on that, and the mention that he's worked as a youth pastor and everything else, to me, kept it in the sphere of like secular production.
It's his story.
Not religious production.
Yeah.
If you go into the sphere of religious production, there's the secular world will kind of write it off to begin with.
Oh, I had friends that are just atheists and were like, oh no, I saw the trailer and I heard faith. I'm not even going to watch it. I'm like, well, that's too bad too.
Yeah.
But it was something I really sweat over was to what level are we sharing? We have to tell his story.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. So, and he is a man of faith. It has to be in there.
Yep.
But to what degree? Because I don't want it to be a roadblock. I didn't want it to be a sell point or a roadblock.
Right.
And that was
And I appreciated that
footing.
move. I could sense that. And when I first saw that, I was like, does this turn into a testimony flick in a sense? And to keep it like, yeah, this is part of his life, but it's not the focus of this film.
Right.
The focus of this film is the overall human experience of this guy and the people that he affects,
Yes.
and faith is part of that.
Yeah.
And that's just part of it. It's not the focus.
He talks about how faith is why he's here.
Yeah.
I mean, the reason that they survived the hurricane is faith. Who am I to say that faith isn't worth talking about if that's why he thinks his family's alive?
Yeah.
But faith's powerful. Just because I don't prescribe to it doesn't mean it's not something worth describing. But it was tricky. There were times where I was like, I think we got to put that in a little bit more. Man, that is heavy. And then and it's funny, as it's starting to get to be seen, I'm hearing more and more. Like I do ask every once in a while, I'm like, was that a little churchy? And people are like, no, it's definitely not churchy. It's not churchy. It's about his faith is in there.
Yeah.
And then like I had a friend who is very churchy watch it this summer and was blown away and saw so much in it. And I was like, well, that's kind of cool too.
That's a real good move that's happening, because then you have the ear of that market without offending, the other, and you walk the line and allow people to make up their mind rather than propaganda.
Yes, I really didn't want propaganda outside of support East End and Grand Bahama. That was the only propaganda I wanted. Was these people need help? Here's how we can help. But other than that, I was like, this is about what his message is for him.
Yep.
None of it is about how other people should live. I think that's one thing that's so cool about our relationship. He's a passionate man of faith. I'm a passionate man of curiosity. We work beautifully together. He has never pushed it on me. Not once. It's tough for churchy people to not push it. It just is. It's part of the goal is to push.
You're talking to the choir here,
yeah,
buddy.
it's genuinely part of the rhetoric is to spread it. I love that he's like, we can talk about faith, humanity, spirituality. We get deep into all that and have so much in common. He just reads a different book than I do. And how cool is that? If we can all talk like that, I think there's a lot to that.
Yeah.
Being open to what the other person is experiencing rather than just trying to force your opinion on everybody. That's one of the toughest parts about that outspoken churchy is that it can be so forced. Yeah. It's just like, can we get there together? Can we not? Do we need to? Like,
yeah, it's a very odd and difficult thing. The thing I've realized recently, more so, the exact thing that we're talking about, that oddity within faith, it's belief enforced by communal or relational duress. So if your belief system has too many earmarks of what would make you unique to be a part of that faith, if you start to not be on board with some of those earmarks of being part of that faith, you start to fall out of favor of being in relationship with these people. And so you're
talking about like the church community, like a isolated church community at a time.
Yeah. And so I grew up in Seventh-day Adventism, which is pretty strong culturally. I'd say only third behind Mormonism and Jehovah's Witness.
Oh, interesting.
Probably pretty strongly tied, not tied literally, but in the race for being most, not culty, but culturally separated.
And like how many aspects of your life it affects, or is
all
right. I would say you're talking about in those upper involved categories. It involves every single thing you do has that filter.
Oh, 100%. Who you marry, where you go to school, what you eat, what day you worship, all the stuff, all the things, how you dress, depending on how conservative, strict, involved you get.
That's how you were raised?
My parents were pretty, compared to how Christianity in New England is, this is called the burnt over district because in the late 1800s, there were so many revivals in this area, everyone got burnt out on it.
Yep.
This is where Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness, and Seventh-day Adventists came from, the Northeast. The Mormons got run out of every town.
They're in New York and go to Ohio.
And JWs are, we still don't know. They don't even really have windows on their churches. So this is a joke mostly.
No, I get it.
But yeah, just very, very, and so Adventism is a few steps behind that, but still there's a very, very strong culture. And depending on where you're at in the nation, it can be an even stronger.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And this is the location where it is
if you're in Provo versus New Jersey and you're a Mormon, they're pretty different lifestyles.
So New England is just really, really conservative in general. And when it comes to spirituality, you're left with the extremes, either atheists or really religious people. So that's what you end up with here. That's what I ran into when I moved here. And the documentary that I haven't finished, going on close to a decade now. Yet is based on that and is pretty good so far, but there's the second half of it of explaining how to live and how to live, feel, think, and relate after.
And then what do you do with that information? Here's what you've learned. What do you the audience do with that?
Yeah. It's more so using where I've come to as an example to offer to others who might be like me and finding themselves in that situation of a lot of cognitive dissonance within that any community like that, and how to deal with it. It's a very, very difficult thing, because as soon as you lose that surety, all the most beautiful moments become the most painful, because once you thought you were going to live forever with the people you love, and you know, to now, this is it.
Yeah.
And then that moment with your kid is like, yeah, this won't be happening again. And it feels like you know those things where they throw metal objects in and they're these churning things that suck it in, and you know, the other end just comes out like shredded paper, basically. It feels like life has a maw of death like that just coming behind it for you and everyone you love when you lose your faith. Or like you're a factory worker that the bell just rang and you're thinking you have a weekend, and as you're running for the door, everyone says, no, we have to work all weekend. It's a weird, like, just running into a different reality in middle age. And it is so discombobulating, hurtful for people around you, difficult, confusing. But to get through it, eventually you start to appreciate life a lot differently and a lot more within those moments. You become more present. You become more intentional. You become more able to allocate more importance to being present. There's less of an ability to say, we'll be together forever. I don't need to deal with that right now.
Right.
Kind of, it sounds crazy.
No, I think there's a lot to that. If you feel like this is it, you're going to do everything you can to have that experience with those people. You're going to want to spend every minute. You want to go to every soccer game. You're going to want to have every conversation with your parents. If you're like, oh no, we're going to hang forever. You're right. There isn't a urgency. Yeah. Which can be maybe a little sad but that's an interesting.
But there's also the thing that if you have to live under that threat of death and you come to that understanding late in life, you're already emotionally formed in a different way. You don't get to unemotionally form yourself from that childhood experience.
So childhood experience of knowing,
of believing that.
Belief that it's going to keep going. Yeah.
So if you come to belief in adulthood, that's bonus.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's like, whoa.
Our life just extended infinitely.
Right.
Amazing.
Lose that in adulthood. All of a sudden, it's like, I don't get to undo my childhood emotional state. And that's a really weird thing to get into and figure out. But it makes for potentially an interesting documentary if I ever complete it. So.
I hope you do. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, I'd like to show you the trailer
I'd love to
before
see
you
it.
go. That's all I've got, because after we filmed it that Christmas, I spent like 2 weeks just trying to work on a trailer. Got to like 22 versions of it, showing my family, who are all probably mostly distraught and trying to smile while I'm showing them, here, look, I'm leaving the faith that you all are part of, and what do you think? You know, and
deeply ingrained.
Yeah, and I mean, my dad's a pastor, my father-in-law's a pastor, my grandfather was a pastor. Like, I'm a fly fisherman, you know, version of this thing. Honestly, that is weird. But yeah, it's interesting. What is the process of making a film for someone like me who, like, I can do, oh boy, this is hard. I don't know what it is. So the you know, mile out perspective of filmmaking as you see it now, that you could encapsulate within a paragraph, what does that whole process look like? Well, you get an idea, you fund it yourself, you try and complete it. Then you get someone to buy it for distribution rights, and then you have to follow it around to different film, blah, 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 blah. What?
That's a pretty good breakdown. You know, it's interesting. I've done it a lot of different ways, and this is our first time at scale. So I feel like what we're just starting with the Winter Adaptive Sports piece is like the first time we can really show that we know how to do that. Because and we're realizing that, and before we got our sales agent, like how we're trying to sell a film or even get into film festivals, like, well, I'm not a director with a name. Meko's not a subject with a name. And for better or worse, Bahamas aren't really recognized as like a thing unless you know of Nassau. So like we had decided to go backwards and go back to kind of grassroots, and it's like, all right, well, if Meko can't come into the States because of his visa issue, we don't have a name to speak of. We got to create one. So I'm literally going to show this thing and do Q&As afterwards and press the flash afterwards and engage with as many people as I can and build out a community of support behind it. So that was a little different. I think what's really fun about this other one is that we're I think doing it the right way from the get-go. And right now we're kind of transitioning from what we call research phase to pre-production. And I've never really done that before. That's the right way to do it, is to really research your subject, really set up your timeline for everything, find your funding and support, then go shoot. Then you have your product and you already have your post-production workflow. Then you already know who's going to be helping you sell it and how you're going to, where and when you want to get into. You reach out to those festivals ahead of time. You're not just part of a stack of a pile that they're not going to look through. And we've learned a ton of that's 4 of those processes I didn't know about before Meko. I was like, shoot, edit, sell. And admittingly, until somewhat recently, the model of all you need to do is get into a film festival, and then what they're for is for somebody to see it, buy it, distribute it. That's not a thing anymore. But now my understanding is that film festivals now, it's like people, I equate it to like the college athlete camp route. It's like for a while you're like, oh, I'll go to the camp to get spotted by a coach, and I'll go to the college. They already know who they're looking for. At all these film festivals, the distributors already know what they're looking for. If they haven't heard of your film, they're not going to find it. It's not what they're there for. And a film festival crowd isn't necessarily what I'm learning. I'm not trying to make general sweeping statements, more just our experience. Isn't necessarily, it's more they're there to be there maybe, and it's not as much about what they're trying to get out of each one necessarily as I thought. And so now we have to distribute by creating a name, hiring somebody to go as a sales agent, and then go take the package and go to distros and actually try and find somebody to distribute it. And that's where we are right now with Meko, trying to set up. We got some offers coming in. We're trying to figure out if these are the right moves. Ideally, we sell. And the game plan, and what I really believe is how we make the biggest impact, is have it on a streaming service, not a film festival. I'm just learning that people are there to go to the film festival. Like I said, I think my understanding is that if somebody's willing to press play on their living room, they're ready to take it in a little bit more, potentially.
Right.
Maybe they're on their laptop, but I think with a doc, you've got an engaged audience. And I think that's how we're going to drive support for him. This other one is really fun. Just like I said, we're trying to show that we have a process now. We know what we're doing. So my assistant director, she's working on our grant applications. I didn't even know you could get a grant to make a film before Meko. Again, I was just a sick animal trying to do something. So ideally, if we do this right, we have our schedule lined up for shooting. We got our team lined up. We're finding our support right now. We're hopefully going to get a grant, and we can fund the whole thing and then sell it and actually do it for real. But I think what's cool is like if we didn't go through the passion project of just having to see it done, we wouldn't have known all these other steps and know how to do it right. And so I think that's where maybe being a little bullish in your perspective and being like, no, it has to get done. And I think maybe certain people would say, if it's not greased or set up, it's not worth the time and the investment. I'm like, I don't know. If you won't know until you get there. But if you finally figure out the process, and like, I'm so proud of the fact that we did just keep going. We're like, we'll find it. We just have to do this, because I would have never even known what these steps to get distro are. Right. And learn all the stuff we've learned in the last few months I didn't even know existed. And now we're in a whole different ballgame, talking with potentially decent sized distribution company about getting it on streaming services. And that's how you do that. That was just a dream before. And now we know how to actually turn that circle around and get something potentially in that place, and not have it just be a movie, but have it be something that we really care about. I'm not worried about that. That's already in the bank. We know we care and we're making something fun. Now now we actually have like the workflow to do it right. And that's part of why I really wanted to do a short doc next, was I wanted a quicker turnaround to basically prove to ourselves more than almost anything else that we know how to do it right. So then we can move on to another feature that we can sell.
Right.
I'm learning, I guess shorts are really for festivals. Features are really for to sell. It's again, when you're just trying to get the word out, it's almost like what matters more, but this is like, yeah, let's show that we know what we're doing now. We've learned a ton.
I feel like your process of figuring this out is no different than your process of shooting. How I feel about these things, it's like, I don't see how can be done, but let's move forward.
Gotta try it.
Let's go.
You gotta try it.
And then you run into it. You're
Yeah.
like, all right, problem number one.
Yeah.
How do we solve that?
Yeah.
Now, the other problem is we still need a distribution and a successful movie or documentary. What do we do now?
What do we do?
Next, okay, do that. Now, there's like, some people can just watch a tutorial and do it.
Oh yeah. No,
And I like, my wife picked out, like, before we did the documentary on religion, or set out on the production part of it, after, I think I had ordered this like Filmmakers Academy thing that this guy picks out just pet movements or causes. Like he did the Vaxxed thing of back in the documentary about vaccines. He just finds a very passionate group who doesn't have a documentary, figures out how to make a documentary about that, has a very succinct way to just get interviews. And to me, it was more so kind of like ambulance chasing, not as much like finding stuff that you're passionate about and figuring out how to make it work.
Right.
More so find something that other people are passionate about and take what you are passionate about with filmmaking and apply it to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, sure, but it's not necessarily, I couldn't watch that, and it's not necessarily the whole ball of filmmaking that I'm interested in with like why I entered into that documentary. It's like a process of the difficulty, but I think I came to enough of a difficult process to where my interest in figuring out the difficult process was less than the difficulty of figuring out that process.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm like, all right, now I have to pay.
Right.
I have to pay.
Yeah.
It's beyond my ability to like read about and execute.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's real. I mean, there was nothing I could read on how to get to a distributor. They're like, you need the email.
Yeah.
It's like you can't find somebody at Amazon Prime unless you have their email.
Right.
Like
right.
you need to get a sales agent.
It's in the phone book.
I was like, wait, I can't Google that? Like, no, there's just certain stuff, and I don't learn through tutorial very well, admittedly, but I need to hands-on. But yeah, it's that part is tough, and I think when you look at it, I think people that project really well probably look at that and see those roadblocks or frustrations or maybe bank, places where you have to dump a bunch of money and they're like not worth it. I'm like, what a shame. How cool would it be to see if you could see that through?
Right.
But yeah,
I think this is a good place before the two of us get bored. We're like, this is a new conversation.
Oh, yeah. I can't believe how many things we touched on. That was awesome.
Well, we would continue to go. We should make this an annual thing to just check up on where creativity levels and everything are at.
I love it. I'd love to do that.
Touch back in with Harrison Buck. But we need to get a voiceover of like someone who would narrate a lumberjack film. They're like, Harrison Buck.
Oh, I like that. It's been real gruff.
But thank you so much for coming up to Biddeford to talk about your life, your experiences, your career, and everything. It's been really interesting to get to know you more. The massive gap in my intelligence was not understanding that people are different. I always felt that everyone had the same mind and the same experience. I know how stupid that sounds now, but I just assumed everyone must be thinking about the same things, experiencing the same things, emotionally responding to everything in the same way. And to really get into like relationship and marriage and realize how different people are has been really interesting. And these kind of conversations, to be able to find people who are like me, to be able to get to know, like, I think I see that in you too. Is that real?
Yeah.
How do you deal with it? How's that feel? It feels that way for you too. Okay. All right. But not for, all right. It's just very, I think it helps with imposter syndrome. I think it helps with the up and downs to know like, oh, other people go through this.
Oh yeah.
Other people see it the same way.
For sure.
Okay, when I run into this again, I'll know you were going to run into this.
Right.
Maybe you need to go skiing for snowboarding, surfing, fly fishing for a bit, let it pass, use it as your time of thinking, working through these ideas. And then as the energy and creativity comes back, that's when you jump on it.
Yeah.
Allow for that ebb and flow and riding of that wave to some degree.
Well,
So
it can be isolating to that point. I agree. That's a unfortunately myopic perspective, but it's also a very real one that a lot of people do face. And I think we won't get into politics, but like I think that's a huge part of the issue is that people assume everybody thinks one way or the other, and not with 50 Shades of Grey. And however, when you are a creator, I don't feel like I do bump into other super just thoughtfully curious, creative, trying things. I find it so refreshing and fun to talk to you about it because I feel like I found a brother, like somebody that I can really relate to that really gets
I got a brother,
kind of a complex story. And like sometimes people ask me what I'm doing and their eyes glaze over because it's like if I can give you like a this thin surface grass level, like yeah, it's good. But if you actually want to know anything about what we're doing, you need like how much time you got to backfill and understand. It's like to know me, you got to know the head injury, but it doesn't define. And to know Meko, you've got to know what we've been through. It's just not the same thing. And I'm okay with that, but it kind of ruffles people's feathers. It doesn't fit into a tight box. And I kind of feel that more that they're like, I can't relate to you. And I don't necessarily take that as a good thing.
Yeah.
I'm trying to learn that might not be a bad thing. It's like, hey, that's fine. You can't. That's all right if you can't relate.
The fact that maybe we can't relate, not you and I, but like to someone else, might mean that you're a good person to work with.
Yeah.
In that, you might be really interested in the things that I'm not good at and not interested in. And that's one of the major things I learned from my first foray into self-employment with my friend Caleb, who now runs Woodhull. Is that we didn't have complementary talent sets.
Yeah.
He and I both had the same areas of interest and aesthetic capabilities. Like if I had been a business manager, accounting type, and he had been who he was, we would have great. But it was two people essentially trying to do the same thing while he had a more long-lasting ability to carry loads of stress and more drive and more focus than me. That made it just difficult for him to run a business with someone like me, who's like, I'll be in at 10 after surfing, and then I'll work late. You know, I'm all over the place, and he was, you know, a little more regimented. So that was, in that way, it was complementary, but not enough to run a business like that. And it oftentimes especially with a creative business, I think you kind of need a captain of the ship rather than like design by committee kind of thing.
Totally.
So,
oh my God.
Yeah. But
well said.
Thanks for coming up to Biddeford. We got to do this again. I would love to check in with you again next year at this time or whenever.
Awesome.
Just because, you know, to see where other people are at, what they're doing is just always inspiring and good to hear about. So
thank you so much for having me.
Harrison Buck, where can people find more about Meko?
Yep.
Meko and you and your company and blah, blah, blah.
For me, Instagram's probably the easiest, at Buck Naked. No dashes, underscores, or numbers, just Buck Naked. My photo website is harrisonbuck.com. It's my fine art photography. Pandion, Pandion, it's a Greek word, pandioncreative.com is our production company. That's where you can find the trailer for Meko. And then just the hashtag Meko movie. Hashtag Meko movie is where you'll find anything that we've put out at this point. And I would love to come back, and I would love to be able to tell you this time next year where you can watch the movie.
Oh, that'd be great. And for people who hear this who might want to go and find more out about Meko and his business, did you say what that was?
Meko Bahamas, Meko Bahamas.com for his website.
Okay. Yeah. And when the movie comes out, you guys are going to want to see it. It's there's heartstrings, there's beauty, there's fishing.
Got it all. Maybe we can even put up a link in bio or something for the trailer.
Oh yeah. Send us a link for the trailer, and we can attach it to this. So
that'd be awesome.
Harrison Buck, thank you so much.
Thank you. Really nice to be here.